So my name is Hugh Tregoning. I'm Professional Liaison Consultant for the Health and Care Professions Council. And today's session, as you can see on the screen, is all about identifying modern-day slavery, particularly highlighting its relevance to patient safety. So we often view it through a criminal justice lens or a human rights lens or as a moral issue, and it is all those three things. But increasingly, we're seeing to recognise in the research that it's a patient safety issue as well. So people caught in modern-day slavery may present not just as patients, but crucially also as colleagues or other members of the wider healthcare team. That's in health and social care settings across our healthcare system. So modern-day slavery can have direct implications for patient safety, team dynamics, organisational responsibility, and to have legal ramifications too. And this means that as employers, team leaders, and healthcare professionals, we need to be alert to the signs, both to protect those at risk, but also to uphold safe and ethical care environments. So we're going to explore how modern-day slavery can affect health and care settings, why it's a safety issue, and what practical steps we can take to recognise and respond to it. The session does contain content related to human trafficking, including forced labour and sexual exploitation. And whilst we don't delve deeply into these topics, some material may be distressing or triggering for some participants. And if that's the case, please do take care of your well-being. Feel free to go off camera or step away and reach out for support if required. I want to start by asking what your first thoughts are when you hear the word slavery. So I'd encourage you not to overthink this. And I'll put a Slido poll up in a second and give you the opportunity just to input what your first thoughts are when you hear the word slavery. So in order to join, you either need to use the QR code on the screen, or you can use a browser, navigate to slido.com and enter the code HCPC-MDS, and then you should be able to enter. So I'll just give you a few moments to get into the poll, and then hopefully we should start to see the answers come up on the screen. This is where I'm hoping that the poll works. Excellent, that's a relief. So thank you to the one person that's in there at the moment and for your answers. I'm hoping others will be able to join in a sec. But yeah, these are all great answers. So it doesn't happen here. Rare, historic. Yeah, so these are very common responses when I talk to people about modern day slavery. And there are other similar responses, such as thinking specifically about the Atlantic slave trade and issues around reparations and the ongoing impact of slavery in the past on the present. I'll just give, someone's just joined, so I'll give you a few more moments to put your answer in. Yeah, oppression. So what you can see on the screen are the commonly searched terms on Google when you type the word slavery into the search bar. So slavery in Britain, slavery museum, slavery abolished, slavery in Africa. When was slavery abolished in England? Reparations, slavery in America. So you can see that in the public imagination, for many, it's viewed as a past evil, something that was abolished, banned, and in some cases left behind in history. So something we should study, reflect on, and remember its lingering impact, challenge the symbols that remain, like the statue of Edward Colston, which you can see being tipped into the harbour in Bristol some years ago. And of course, it is vital that we remember So the saying goes, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So the legacy of the Atlantic slave trade and other major slave trades and minor slave trades still reverberates today, and its repercussions are deeply woven into the fabric of our societies worldwide. But the hard truth is that slavery is not dead, it's in rude health. It's illegal practically everywhere these days, but still happens basically everywhere, including right here in the UK. And it's estimated there are 122,000 people caught in modern slavery in the UK as we speak. So you can look at some figures on the screen. It's estimated there are around 50 million people in situations of modern slavery worldwide. So this is more people in slavery than at any other time in human history. So for reference, the population of England is currently around 58 million people. An estimated 25 of the 50 are trapped in forced labour, making many of the everyday products that we use. And 1 in 4 of those are children working in many places, including factories, farms, and in brothels. It's a £193 billion industry globally. So modern day slavery is defined as the recruitment, movement, harbouring or receiving of children, women or men through the use of force, coercion, abuse of vulnerability, deception or other means for the purpose of exploitation. The goal is always the same, it's exploitation, it's using someone for profit against their will. So slavery may look quite different today than it did in the past, but the underlying abuse of power, the abuse and exploitation of vulnerability and the denial of freedom remains the same. It's important to also talk about servitude. So servitude is a particularly serious form of denial of freedom. It includes, in addition to the obligation to provide certain services, the obligation on the serf to live on the other's property and the impossibility of changing his or her status. So this is someone being forced to work for another person and living on their property without being able to leave or change their situation. So the definition between modern slavery and servitude isn't always obvious, and not all exploitation fits a single pattern or falls under the strict definition of slavery. So people caught in servitude can also be coerced or controlled in ways that limit their freedom, even if they appear to be free on the surface. They may be paid, have access to their identity documents, or seem to be working voluntarily, but those signs alone don't rule out exploitation and illegality as well. So these are the main categories of modern day slavery. You may see different categories, but these cover most of the main ones, broadly agreed by the main bodies. So human trafficking is the illegal trade of people for exploitation, often lured by false promises of jobs, a better life, and it involves sexual exploitation, forced labour, or even organ trafficking. Forced labour happens when people are made to work against their wills, very common in agriculture. That's a very seasonal industry, for example, working the land or collecting crops, collecting in the harvest. In construction, mining, domestic work, and in factories. The victims are often threatened, abused, or have their IDs taken to prevent escape or prevent them presenting to the authorities or getting help. Child slavery includes children forced into labour, armed conflict in some places in the world, begging or trafficking, and don't forget county lines as well, which is a form of modern day slavery. So sexual exploitation, victims are most commonly women and children, but not exclusively, forced into the sex trade through violence, threats, or manipulation. And growing areas online sexual exploitation of children, including the live streamed abuse and trafficking of children through digital platforms. Forced labour happens when people are made to work against their will. I think we've already covered this actually. I've got somehow managed to get 2 of those on the slide, so apologies for that. So there's an extra bit of information there around forced scamming. So in some parts of the world, there are compounds where people are being held against their will and forced to scam, often over the phone or over the internet, individuals typically in Western Europe or in America to commit kind of financial crime. So you may have seen media reports in and around modern day slavery, and certainly the media coverage has been growing in recent years. But actually, because of its hidden nature, getting an accurate measure of the prevalence of modern day slavery is actually quite difficult. So the best measures that we have come from the police. So the police collect data on potential victims. They record rescues, investigations relating to trafficking and exploitation. And this may help us to identify trends, hotspots, and types of exploitation. This is obviously not perfect. It's reliant on crimes being reported to and known to the police, but it does provide us a vital snapshot of the problem, guiding us as to where support and resources may be needed the most. It also helps policymakers and regulators and organisations to develop targeted strategies to protect victims and prevent exploitation. I recognise that the map may be quite small on your screen, especially if you've joined on a smartphone. But the areas in red, orange and yellow show higher levels of crime or alleged cases reported to the police, but obviously don't mean that there isn't an issue elsewhere. Wales, for example, where I live, is light grey. There are less people living in these areas, but there also may be less crime reported or detected. So another way to measure the prevalence is by relying on NGO data. Unseen is one of the biggest organisations in this space. They run the Modern Day Slavery Helpline and produce a report each year on the usage of the helpline. So this is a confidential 24/7 service for individuals to report concerns or to seek help related to modern day slavery. It's available via phone, web and app, and I'll talk more later on about how you can use that and access it. It has support in over 200 languages, and in 2023 received a record 11,700 contacts, which is a 19% increase from the previous year. And notably, reports from the adult social care sector rose by 30%, highlighting the sector's vulnerability to exploitation. These figures are likely to just be the tip of the iceberg, being the cases that have come through to the Modern Day Slavery Helpline. And that's in part the reason for this session, is to help raise awareness among regulated professionals of the HCPC and their managers and leaders and other stakeholders about the risks and also the signs, and to help increase reporting and increase our understanding of this issue. So we're going to focus on the care sector in the UK. So the care sector is susceptible to worker exploitation and modern day slavery. So we have an ageing population, so almost 1 in 5 of the UK population is over 65, and obviously there's an upward trend on that. Over 11 people aged 65 plus, 11 million people aged 65 plus are living. Over 11 million people are 65 plus, and 900,000 of those also are living with dementia and multiple other comorbidities as well. And this means we have a growing demand for care. So the workforce needs around care are really significant. Care sector posts rose from 1.79 million in 22-23, and we've had a significant surge in international recruitment, not just in regulated professionals, but also to fill workforce gaps in the care sector. It's important to highlight that there are 75,000 or so regulated health and social care professionals working in this space. And this gives us a unique opportunity to identify issues around care and modern day slavery, and hopefully to get help for those caught in those situations and make the care settings safer for all. So the types of settings where modern day slavery can happen in care is around residential care homes and nursing homes, adult daycare and hospices, and domiciliary or home care as well. But these roles often have very high turnover in care. There's acute demand, so sometimes care is needed 24/7. Personal care support is needed, well-being support. There are irregular shifts, nights and weekends. Often no formal qualifications are required, which means that there's a broad range of people who can be put into these posts, and it is open to exploitation. So these figures are also from Unseen, and looking at this chart, you can see the top three categories around labour, sexual and criminal exploitation. The 20 to 29 year age group is the most frequently affected. Labour exploitation is reported more than 3 times as often as sexual exploitation. Many people assume that modern day slavery is all about sexual exploitation. Obviously, it's a significant and highly damaging issue for individuals involved. But forced labour is actually much more prevalent in reported cases. And this side-by-side comparison shows the relative difference in case numbers and victims of modern slavery and labour abuse. So labour abuse cases demonstrate worker rights abuses, but without the level of control that's characteristic and would meet the definition of modern day slavery. And you can see that the care sector is very high on the list, showing that whilst we have to be mindful of people caught in modern day slavery, exploitative labour practices can fail to meet the threshold, but still create significant risks for those caught in it, but also the people being cared for. So common recruitment tactic in modern day slavery involves targeting individuals overseas and in the UK with misleading job offers. These will often come over social media, false promises of high wages and excellent working conditions. Care work is often promoted as well paid, an opportunity to improve wages and living standards, either for the individual or to be able to send money to support families back home. But these offers frequently misrepresent the actual pay, conditions and support available. And individuals from overseas may be charged fees for recruitment and safe transport into the country, which then they're required to pay back. Upon arrival, those caught in modern day slavery will face exploitative conditions. They will have ID documents often withheld or confiscated and not be paid, or if they are paid, it's coming off a debt, and they'll have restricted freedoms as well. It's important to challenge the common misconception that people in modern day slavery are abducted or subjected to physical violence. So whilst both those two things can happen, while violence can occur, coercion frequently relies on threats, intimidation, or warning of deportation, so warning of handing them over to the authorities to be sent back home. And perpetrators can be based overseas or within the UK and may include acquaintances, family members, or recruiters. So I'd like to jump to our second Slido. Same code, HCPC MDS, or you can use the QR again, and just ask you where you think you or your team members may encounter people in situations of modern day slavery. So have a think about the context in which you're working and some of the information that I've already provided and what you know of modern day slavery. And if you're able to, just let me know where you think the most likely contexts are in which you or your team members would encounter people in modern day slavery. So I'll just give you a few moments to get into the poll. I always feel like Slido should play a fanfare when the first person goes in, just to help the presenter's anxiety over it. Yeah, thank you. So care homes. Yeah, so that could be residential care homes or nursing homes. Any social care setting. So individuals going into care homes, individuals going into people's own homes. Patients, yeah. So if people work in A&E, for example, if people work in sexual health clinics or settings, in GPs, in primary care, any settings like that. Yeah, so in people's homes and potentially in your personal life as well. So there are some contexts, for example, around car washing, and particularly in the restaurant sector, hospitality, and areas around construction, which are particularly high risk of exploitation as well. So these are some of the situations or contexts in which our professionals, so registered professionals, may encounter victims of modern day slavery. So obviously not an exclusive list, but emergency departments or urgent care. So if somebody has been injured in the line of their work, they may be brought in, highly likely to be accompanied by somebody. GP practice and walk-in clinics for the same reason. Adult social care and care homes, mental health and community services. That could be to manage a mental health problem just because of the conditions in which that person is living and working. The sexual health clinics, and in maternity and paediatric services as well. So what do you think is the potential impact of modern day slavery in healthcare settings? What I'd like you to do for this one is to think about what the impact is on the person caught in modern day slavery, the recipient, around patient safety, and then also around healthcare professionals, so the wider team around the patient or the service user as well. So what do you think is the potential impact of modern day slavery? Yeah, so patient safety is a key one. So when I go out and I speak to healthcare teams, registered professionals, we often talk about mental health and stress and incivility and these things which affect how people feel doing the job and how that can affect the quality of the work that they do. And you can imagine that multiplied tenfold for someone who's caught up in modern day slavery. The stress of the living conditions, the stress of the working conditions, working under coercion, under threat, for no pay, is not going to make them do their best work. They may also not be qualified to be doing the work that they do with some of the most vulnerable patients or service users that we work with. They're likely to be impacted themselves, their kind of physical, mental well-being. I agree is going to have the impact of pushing wages down, potentially lead to care not being valued, potentially undermining the reputation of the organizations that they work for within, or the teams that they work within as well. Yeah, and there may be adverse media stories in and around the sector. Extra work having to be picked up by other members of the team, and also other team members being less safe as well. Thank you. That's really helpful to get your answers in. So research shows that there is a very broad impact of modern day slavery in and around the health and care system. So the recipient of the victim is likely to be affected in their physical and mental health. They're experiencing a loss of autonomy, a loss of freedom, of human rights, and they're likely to be very isolated as well. In terms of the patient or client, there's a risk of neglect or harm that can be through commission, doing the wrong thing, or not doing the right thing, and is likely to lead to inconsistent or poor quality care in the care system, particularly in contexts which are less supervised. So if you think about care going into an elderly person living on their own with dementia who needs help with feeding, washing, mobility, and medications, an unqualified carer may well be involved in every aspect of that care. And there may not be anybody else around, a family member, a member of the multidisciplinary team, to notice if things are going wrong. And so that could lead to significant safeguarding failures, a failure to notice deterioration in the patient's condition, for example. So what about the wider care team? Well, significant emotional strain around not just working in a system that's not working because of exploitative labour practices or modern slavery, but also the emotional strain around noticing it, the moral injury around that, and if they have to report, then that also has a kind of cognitive load and emotional weight to it. There are also legal and professional risks to agencies, organisations, leaders, managers, and regulated professionals working in this space if they notice things but don't highlight them, but also if harms occur as a result of people caught in modern day slavery working within that system. This is a quote from Justine Carter, the director of Unseen. So the issue with care workers experiencing exploitation is that very vulnerable people are being employed to care for very vulnerable people. So what do the standards say? Well, standard 7, and I won't read this out, but does say it's our duty to respect confidentiality, to keep information safe and secure. And we can share personal information when we have the person's consent, it's required by law, or it's necessary to protect others from risk or harm. So you should follow your employer's policies and data protection laws and talk to safeguarding leads if you have one. But it's important to highlight that we can share confidential information if it is necessary to protect others from risk or harm. So what we've heard is that people don't report because they're worried about laws around confidentiality. So how do we identify modern day slavery? Well, there are numerous signs which will be different in each case and each context. But what I'll do is I'll give you a moment to read through these. So healthcare professionals and the wider care team have a key role in identifying victims of modern day slavery. And so we should look for those kind of physical or mental health signs. This could be around unexplained injuries, exhaustion, anxiety, or trauma. Notice if someone appears to be controlled by another person or persons, appears fearful and reluctant to speak freely about their life, about where they're living. Be aware of poor working conditions, equipment, poor living conditions, overcrowded housing, or long hours without breaks, and people who don't appear to have access to personal documents like passport or ID. Should pay attention to inconsistent stories or vague answers about a situation, and any signs of debt, unpaid wages, or financial control are really important red flags. So these individuals are likely to be highly isolated. To limit social contact out of fear or being told not to socialize or speak to people that they work with. So what should we do if we spot the signs? So it's really important in the first place that you record your concerns and you raise a safeguarding concern following your organizational policies. Now, if you work on your own, but you work in, for example, care settings or domiciliary space, then you probably won't have organizational policies. So you may not be able to do that. But in all cases, if you're concerned about modern day slavery, whether it's happening to you or to somebody else, we can call the modern day slavery helpline. And if we call the modern day slavery helpline, we will speak to a trained advisor who will assist us and also help us file a report if that's necessary. So when we make a call to the modern day slavery helpline, the advisor will always check that the caller is safe to talk, check that the caller is in a safe place, whether anyone is hurt and needs urgent help, and also check if it's safe to call back and how to do so confidentially. They'll ask for certain details, kind of name and that sort of thing, but you are able to remain anonymous. And then they'll work through the options in terms of support. So you have the option to report concerns about someone else, just seek advice on exploitation or abuse, or also ask about training or awareness that may be available to you or your organization. Or it could be someone who's caught in modern day slavery ringing up, asking for direct help or support or rescue as well. So they will often ask what's happened, who's involved, where, to understand the situation, and then they may refer you or the individual to other services, including sharing information with the police or safeguarding teams with consent, unless there's a really serious risk to health or life, and helping with safety planning as well. Occasionally, they will agree to take no action now if the person who is calling is not ready. It's always done at a sensitive pace to the individuals involved, and they'll only follow up if it's agreed that they'll do so. So there is also an unseen app, which you can also file a report on. There's lots of educational materials on there around the general signs of modern day slavery, and this might be something that'll be really helpful for team members to download and have a look at, particularly if you're in a high contact environment where you may be encountering people in modern day slavery. So I have a case study now around the care home setting, and just bear in mind this is only one of the contexts in which this may occur. So let's imagine we have a registered professional who meets Amina, who's a newly arrived care worker from Namibia, working in a residential home. Amina often worked 18-hour shifts, including weekends, and avoided breaks, appeared tired, withdrawn, and reluctant to engage, wasn't included in staff communications, and didn't seem to have a contract. Over time, Amina confided she'd paid £10,000 for a sponsorship certificate, and her wages were being deducted to repay this. She was left with just £200 a month and struggled to afford to feed herself. When she raised concerns, her employer threatened to report her to immigration and harm her family in Namibia. The professional recognised multiple signs of modern slavery, debt bondage, threats, control, and exploitation. The registered professional called the modern day slavery helpline to discuss the situation. A trained advisor first ensured it was safe to talk, then listened carefully to the concerns. The advisor confirmed that Amina's situation showed strong signs of modern slavery and talked through referral and support options, including police involvement. So with the helpline support, the case was referred for investigation, leading to Amina's rescue and safe placement in support services. So Unseen works closely with the police by providing specialist guidance during investigations to help identify victims and to ensure their safety, and also assist in coordinating rescue operations and offering ongoing care and recovery to those freed from modern day slavery. So this case study is actually based on a true story, with the names and some of the details altered for anonymity. So what do I think are some of the key takeaways from today's session? I think I would say that we must recognise as leaders and managers within the health and social care system that modern day slavery is an increasing challenge, that it is a significant operational issue, a significant safety issue, and that those caught in modern day slavery don't just present as patients, but could also be caregivers as well. So we do need to be familiar with the risks and signs of modern day slavery, as do our team members. And we should understand the expectations placed on us to report by the standards and professional codes as well. So the main ways we can raise suspicions around modern day slavery or get advice and support in the UK is to call the modern day slavery helpline or use the Unseen app. And that brings us to the end of the session today. So hopefully that was helpful and informative. I do have an evaluation form that I'd be really grateful if you could fill that in to let me know what you found helpful, and get your feedback on the session generally. And if you do want to talk more on this issue, feel free to reach out to us in the professional liaison service, or you could email me directly as well. And yeah, thanks very much for listening today, and look forward to seeing you at another session soon.